House to Home, brought to you by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.
Hi and welcome back, everybody. This is House to Home, where we talk about all things property, and today we are talking about rights. What are they, who has them, and how do they apply? Now, good thing we're talking about rights, because we'll swing the camera to the right, where we can see my good friends Liz and Gina from RE/MAX Diamond Realty. Half a day, ladies.
Half a day.
Half a day.
Okay, this is a very complicated issue, I would think, because you know, some people say a bunch of property owners get together and they say we either want to make a collective decision, but what if one person, you know, kind of objects to it? Does every person in that situation, Liz, we'll start with you, have an equal say, or is it more like a democracy where if the majority of the people feel like a certain way, everybody gets pulled in that direction?
Let's say, for example, you have an acre of property and you want to build a 4-story building or a 20-unit apartment complex. Normally, there's a number of things you'd have to look at. Is it within the right zone? Do you need to get rezoning to do that? What are the government requirements? Because you'd have to get the proper building permitting. Now, if it doesn't conform with the zone or with the government guidelines, then you'd have to take it before the GLUC to get the proper approvals to get it done. Now, what some people do is they normally hire a consultant to take them through the process, or a landowner, such as yourself, could take it through the process. And then they have a checklist. In order to do this, you have to make sure the infrastructure is in place. The water, the power, the zoning, the number of units. Does it conform to the size? Even when you're building a structure, you have to make sure you have so many parking stalls to accommodate that size building. So there's so many factors that you might have to employ an engineer, an architect, a consultant to help you get through the process. But you have to meet all the government checklists. Now, if it's a bigger project, it may even go as far as going before and going through the process of a public hearing, especially if it's a huge project. It might go before the community, that particular village, to get public input. Now, although public input is valid, it doesn't necessarily affect your ability to develop that property.
And we're kind of seeing that right now with like that Pago Bay development that's been proposed, and you know, there's a certain amount of public backlash to that.
That's a good example.
Yeah. Now, I like that you brought up the fact about a process, and you were saying, you know, you may have to have a public hearing, you may have to, because it's a regulatory function, you may have to go through a certain amount of agencies. But Gina, is this possibly even something that has to go through the court system? No,
the process is in place.
Okay.
The only time it goes through the court system is if during the process somebody opposes the process and says, hey, wait a minute, I went through the process, let's say
under dispute.
Yeah, you know, they went through the process and they didn't like the outcome. Then that's a recourse that any individual could take upon themselves and bring it to court. But what we really wanted to talk about is the fact that for instance, if I wanted to develop my property and I wanted to develop my property outside of what I legally can do right now. So my property, for instance, is only designed for housing, and I want to build a condo on that property. There is a process. You go through the government, you apply. Liz mentioned you go through GLUC, Guam Land Use Commission, and in opening yourself up to that process, you also open yourself up to the public comments, the public hearings, and people have the right to go in there and object. And I've done that myself. I mean, we have a piece of property that's next to my home, and the person who owns it, you know, she has the right to want to develop anything she wants on the property, but her neighbors within 500 feet of her property have the right to go in there and say, hey, wait, what you're trying to build here doesn't really fit in this area. And since you are now asking the government to give you permission to build outside of what you're allowed to do, we have the ability to go in and voice our opinions.
And we've seen this numerous times. You know,
we have.
Like the property over at the old GMH, some people said like it might be a noise like hazard, or every time something comes up like around the airport, they say, or there's a commercial development around the airport, they say like there might be something in terms of noise, or there was even like the cliff line over like near the SDA clinic, and they said
the
if they're
line.
they're gonna build like a hotel right in front of there, they're like, well, you're basically cutting off our beachside view, which we've had for generations in my family.
And that's our point, you know, is that there's already a process in place for homeowners, for property owners, and there's a process for people that are within that area who may want to object. And in some cases, like the case you just brought up, the homeowners in that area objected, and that project was, it never happened, right? The Pago Bay controversy. Now, I think what's going on with Pago Bay is a little bit different. The land is zoned for what they're asking to build there, but they want to go over, they want a variance, they want to go beyond what it's zoned for.
See, 10 years ago, that, if I'm not mistaken, 10 years ago, that project was approved. And during that window of time, it was approved for so many units. And it sat, nothing happened. So at this point now, they want to move forward and build the project. But the problem also is, they, instead of building the original project, they wanted to increase the capacity. They wanted to add more units. So at that point, of course, it requires a public hearing. You have to go through it again to get the variance to allow for it. So, and then of course, the biggest factor, maybe 10 years ago, it was fine. And maybe now there are other issues that may have come up, such as the infrastructure. Is there enough sewer to handle the capacity? Now, again, for the public to step in, it's not for us to say. The government has to come in and say, hey, yes, the capacity is there, or no, the capacity is not there. So again, there is a process, and you have to take it through that process, because if the government says it's not, the capacity isn't there, then it stops, or they have to go to the original plan.
All right.
So.
All right. Well, ladies, certainly this is just scratching the surface of this very complicated, very complex issue. So
Yes.
if anybody out there has any information, you can call Liz or Gina at RE/MAX Diamond Realty Guam. They have all the answers, certainly information that you can use. Stay tuned. We are back after this.